welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. My name's Norm Curry, and today we're speaking with Kavitha Royan. Thanks for coming in, Kavitha.
Thank you, Norm. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, just looking at you, I'd say you're a Catholic. Now, what's the story of being a Catholic? Tell me, how did it happen?
Well, for me, I was born a Catholic. My family's a devout Catholic family in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And yes, although my mom's side, she was actually Anglican, but when she married my dad, she became a Catholic. And and we've been brought up in the Catholic faith, so with all the sacraments. And yes, and I would say my father has been a great leader in leading us in our faith.
And so it's been with your mother having been Anglican, it's been in a Christian context from the outset.
Yes, definitely.
Yes. And so that was in Malaysia.
Yes.
What's it like being a Christian in Malaysia?
Well, in Malaysia, I would say Catholicism or Christianity as such is, we're a minority. I suppose a bit like Australia, it's not really that rampant. But having said that, I think because we are such a minority and because we have other religions which are fairly strong as well in Southeast Asia, like such as Buddhism and Hinduism, being a Catholic in Southeast Asia has meant that we've taken our faith fairly seriously. I would say, compared to perhaps being brought up here, but again, it's probably a generalization.
But it does open a potential in coming here. Did you notice that your Catholicism had any differences to it, like it's been nurtured in amongst all of those other faiths in Malaysia? Did you notice there were any subtle differences when you came to Australia?
I think the differences would be in Malaysia, perhaps because it was so ingrained in us, we took it a lot more seriously. With all the feast days, with all the days of obligation, going to weekly mass. I would say it was easier to be quite devout in our faith there because it was something that everyone did, but even if it was in their respective faiths. I would say the difference here is it's very much an effort of your own. Not to say that it isn't over there, but you're very much on your own here to nurture that faith.
So the context in Malaysia encourages you to be devout in that way because everyone else is.
Yes, so it encourages to have some sort of belief and belief system, if you like. So
that's an interesting observation. Here it is indeed. So you came to Australia when you were 18, was it?
Yes, so I came here to do university and stayed on and applied for permanent residency, and I've been working since, and I've settled here really. Settled into life here, I should say.
Yeah. And you, what did you study at university?
I studied finance, so accounting.
Accounting, okay. And that's what you've been working at?
Yes, I have, the commerce industry.
Now, you're a young woman and you're a migrant woman, although you didn't come as a migrant, and you're working in the Australian context and you're a Catholic. What sort of controls and limits does that place around you? Are you openly express your Catholic views, or?
That's an interesting question. From my point of view, I found it very difficult and challenging to be very devout or Catholic, probably obviously Catholic in the context of work, just because, in my opinion, it's very circular here, and to take a religious standpoint in anything, you're almost judged for it in a negative way, and I found it rather challenging in the Australian workplace.
And what did you do to get around that?
Well, I suppose more often than not, I would be silent,
Mm-hmm.
even if I believed and even if I thought differently. I wouldn't be very bold in, I guess, making my viewpoints heard.
Mm. Not wanting to keep making comparisons, and you weren't in the workplace when you were back in Malaysia, but how does that compare there? You know, as a young teenager, and you with Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims, etc., was everybody closed down, or did people tend to express their views?
I think from what I observed, we were all very comfortable expressing our views. We had a lot of respect for our different religions, and I think there was a lot of tolerance, and there was not that much judgment, in my opinion.
Mm. Well, you lived it, so your opinion is valuable there. And that's interesting because Australia pats itself on the back all the time for being it's accepting and secular and wonderful. Perhaps it's not as wonderful as it thinks it is. Okay, you're in your office and someone comes up to you and they start to talk to you about abortion. What do you say?
Well, I suppose I listen to what they have to say about it first, and why they would come to the a conclusion that they have come to, whether why they would support it to begin with. But my view hasn't changed about that, despite listening to it and the various excuses or reasons why people do decide. I suppose with the exception of rape, my view is abortion is a no-no. And
it is a no-no, and it's a time-related matter. We're out of it for the moment. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Support Life, and we're speaking with Kavitha Royan, a young Catholic woman of Malaysian background. We were talking about abortion before the break, and I said, well, if someone started to ask you about abortion, what's your opinion of abortion? What do you think?
Well, I believe that life is sacred and it's God-given, and we don't have the right to decide whether it ends or not. And it's not ours to take.
Right.
So yes, that's my viewpoint on abortion.
And it's a fair view. Are there any circumstances that you could see where abortion might be acceptable?
Well, I suppose there may be a couple, but the one that stands out for me, I suppose, would be in the instance of rape. And in that situation, I think it's really difficult. I guess being a woman, I mean, not having been in that situation myself, but I can only imagine that it would be something very, very difficult for a woman to deal with in carrying a baby to term, and the struggle that she would face. But having said that, I suppose the church's view is that you could give the baby for adoption, and that's an option. But it's still a difficult one, and I'm not quite sure if. Again, I think it really depends on the person, but I can form my view, but I'm not in the situation.
No, that's true, and it's riddled with all sorts of emotional issues, that particular one. That's for sure.
Yes.
Now there's an abortion pill. What is it? RU something or other. It's used as a contraceptive, so it's an abortion pill used as a contraceptive.
Yeah.
What do you feel as a woman about something like that?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's right at all. It's probably sounding very judgmental of me, but I think we need to be responsible for our actions. And I think doing that is just you're stopping a life. It's just no. I don't agree with it.
Well, that rolls over into another area, of course, and that's the area of contraception itself.
Yes.
Now, once again, as a young Catholic woman, what's your opinion of contraception? The church is sort of jumping from one foot to the other on it. What do you think?
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I think I see both sides of the coin, I suppose, and but perhaps before marriage, I particularly think it's not really a good idea with contraception because I'm being Catholic myself. We don't believe in sex before marriage.
That's right.
So the sanctity of, the body is our holy temple, and it's not. We're not meant to have sex prior to marriage, and I suppose within the context of marriage, children are meant to be born within the context of marriage if God destines it to be, and contraception is something that stops that. And why are we meddling with what God's plan? So that's my viewpoint. Yeah,
and that's a traditional view that you would expect a practicing Catholic to entertain.
Yes.
But you're in Australia.
Yes.
Okay. And how do you find, if you enter into conversation like that with women of the same age group or younger, what's their views?
Well, their views would be very different to mine. And again, it would probably be something that I wouldn't discuss just because I think it would be a very heated argument and cause a lot of conflict. And at the end of the day, we live in a society where people believe they should do whatever they believe is right for them. So
yes, we do.
And it's a secular society, so I don't feel that I would have that conversation, and if it comes to it, I'd probably voice my views, but I would certainly not impose it on anyone.
You're reluctant to go there. You can understand that. Well, something which runs parallel to this sort of right to life component is actually euthanasia.
Yeah.
How do you respond to that as a young Catholic woman?
Well, I'm not in favor of euthanasia. Although I'm aware of what's been happening in the United States and in many other countries where it's now quite legal. I would say, it still doesn't. It's really the same principle as abortion in the sense that we're taking the choice to live or the decision to live in our own hands, and again, it's not ours to make.
Yes, which raises the point of God's will. How does God's will focus in your life? How does God's will play out in your life?
That's an interesting one. I think, I struggle with it quite a bit, to be quite honest. My will is not always God's will, it seems to be.
Yes.
But having said that, I believe in being obedient to what God calls me to do, and not going against it because of what I want all the time. But being obedient to the values and the teachings of Christ, and yes, although it may be challenging, it is, I believe, the right way, and the truth.
And so that's something which you hold to yourself when you're working with God's will. Obviously, you don't approach your workmates and say, well, I'm doing this because of God's will. And before you answer that question, I realise God's will is making the clock go click, click, click. So we'll come back to that after the break. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Support Life, and we're speaking with Kavitha Royan. Kavitha, we were on the sort of the touchy subject of God's will before, which sits behind abortion, it's behind euthanasia. And what about, and this is an issue which is topical at the moment, of course, is what about same-sex marriage? How do you feel about that as a young Catholic woman?
I think it's a very difficult subject to approach. Whilst I've had friends who are gay, and I know their story and personally, know the struggles that they've been through, and it doesn't make it easy to take my stance despite knowing that. But I guess I am faithful to my faith still, and it is in the Bible that that it is in God's will that He made man and woman for the purpose of procreation, and it's what He intended for us. So my view on gay marriage as such, or same-sex marriage, as you've put it, is I don't agree with it. If I were to be asked what I agree with, and perhaps gay unions, perhaps, but the word marriage per se means it's between a man and a woman, in my opinion.
Yes, that it is a difficult question, certainly, but it does come back to God's word and God's will, and for you, clearly, you live within the framework of that as far as it's possible to live.
Yes.
Now, going contextually again, take yourself back to Malaysia, and is it easier to hold that view in relation to same-sex marriage, in relation to abortion, in relation to euthanasia, within the context of the religiosity of Malaysia, of this KL?
Yeah, I would believe it is, just because there's more acceptance, tolerance. The irony of it all is, although we live in a society here of freedom of speech, freedom of religion, in a way you are condemned for your views if they're not in congruence with what the general public think or believe. So, yeah, it is an irony.
It is indeed an irony, and one that needs to be reflected on, in fact, because political correctness and secularization are indeed a sharp weapon which cuts deeply into lots of things, and that's just another example. You're presenting an example of the fact that a society which is very religiously oriented, albeit in various ways, but it's easier to live by your faith within a peaceful context there than it is here.
Yes, I certainly agree with you. It is, although there are, there is friction between the different religions. But having said that, there's also a lot of harmony and respect. And although yes, you might hear about it in the media, but they're just certain groups. But still, on the whole, there is unity and there is harmony and respect, and I don't find that so much here, and perhaps it's my experience, but I think I've communicated with various people, and I feel that there is a consensus on that we just don't feel that accepted for our views.
So you go regularly to a Catholic church?
Yeah, I go weekly mass. Yes.
Well, in the Catholic community around that church, in that parish, what's life like there?
I suppose you're referring to in Melbourne over here, and the Catholic parishes.
Yes, where you are now. Yeah.
Well, I find that the Catholic, unless you're in the city, but the suburban parishes are rather quiet, and it's probably more the older or the elderly that come to church, not really the younger,
right?
Or the youth, I should say. So, yeah, it's a very different demographic. So, yeah, it's really quite concerning.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that, so as a consequence, you're not involved in the parish in activities generally?
Generally, yes, I would agree with you. I am not really involved, and I find it very difficult to participate because there's just nothing much to participate in. There is no community as such
No.
in Melbourne or in Australia, perhaps, that for you know, if you're between a certain age and a certain age, it's very much
difficult.
towards the older, or if you're really young in school. That's what my observation has been.
Yeah. Do you have any peers who are the same as yourself? You know, same age group, Catholic. How do you, talking amongst yourselves, what's their general experience?
I think their experience is similar to mine in that it is a challenge to, I suppose, to have a moral compass as well in this circular community, and their experience is such as well that you don't really get that nourishment in your faith because of the way the community operates, I should say.
Yes, yes. So you feel a little bit isolated with your faith.
I would feel that, and being in the age bracket that I am, that I am a little bit isolated.
And how would you, so across these issues that we're talking about, and I've asked you questions and watched you searching your soul to get the answer.
Yeah.
Where is there? Now, I've just looked at the watch. I'm just about to ask you a really long question, and I don't think I will, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to thank you so much for coming and being so open about your life as a young Catholic woman in Australia, and some interesting observations you've made. Thank you very much, Kavitha.
Thank you, Noam. Thank you for having me.
You've been watching Support Life. That's our program for now. Join us next week. Bye for now.